By saying, look, the survey findings are really telling us what we do know at the moment over the past few weeks. We've seen thousands of students on the streets and on campuses protesting against those fees. Let me start by asking you why you chose to look at fourth-year students in the survey.
Okay, the reason why we look at fourth year and above is that PPS's target market is specific to students with postgrad studies or people who are studying towards a qualification 4 years or more. So if you look at our client base, it is doctors, lawyers, engineers, and all of those, their minimum amount of study is 4 years. You've surveyed about 900 plus students in the research. What more has come out about the actual affordability levels among students? What are they saying? I think the problem that we find, David, is that, like you say, a large proportion of them do believe that our fees, university fees, are exorbitant, and that in itself is a barrier to entry into university, which creates a problem because we grew up being told you go to university, you can get a good job. Now, if you can't even get into university, that already makes the future very bleak for you. And with the high unemployment numbers that you mentioned earlier on, with both people who have graduated and those who haven't been able to go through tertiary, it is very concerning.
And it's a bit of a tug of war at the moment. I mean, the universities are saying they're facing very high costs. They have to pass that over to students. The government's persistently telling us, and Blade Nzimande, the higher education minister, again reminding us that they simply do not have the money to cover all the students. Blade Nzimande, in fact, is meeting stakeholders in Cape Town at the moment. If you just take the survey as a clue, what do you think he's being told in that meeting at the moment?
Well, I think there is pressure, obviously, from the students, but also from the universities themselves. In the past, I think, if I am correct, the universities had higher subsidies. A few years ago, the subsidies were cut, and I'm not too sure what the reason for that is. So that probably is what the universities are asking him, that you've gone through all this restructuring, and now you've reduced the subsidies to us. Somebody has to bear those costs. And at the same time, remember, we're trying to play in an international market. And the only way we're going to do that is to have good universities that produce good quality graduates. And the only way to do that, part of doing that, is to get, for example, lecturers that are not necessarily from South Africa. That comes at a cost.
Of course.
So we want our universities to be recognized internationally. That is going to come at a cost. So that's probably what I can imagine the VCs are telling Blade in those sessions, that we need more money. And I think they are well aware that they can't keep putting that pressure on the students. But if they're not going to get the government from South, if they're not going to get the money at least from government, then unfortunately that will be channeled through to the students, which is unfortunate.
I want to talk about other funding mechanisms now. You've done the survey, you've spoken to a bunch of them. What has been said about mechanisms like the National Student Funding Aid Scheme in the survey? Have they mentioned those?
They have. There are problems, and I think last year they did get a new CEO, either last year or early this year, they got a new CEO to run with NEPSAS, because there have been problems there in itself, that there is money there, but is it being used correctly? So I believe that they've now got a new management in to look at those problems, to say, well, with the money that we have, how do we spread that? How do we make that work as best as possible? Because I don't believe that money that we already have is being used optimally. So that's the first issue. The second big issue, I think, which we need to be cognizant of, is that all stakeholders, we can't be pointing fingers. This is not the time to be pointing fingers at each other. All of us need to come together and say, how do we, as a nation who want to grow the economy, help the situation? So there's going to need to be public-private partnerships. We can't just look at Blade and say, well, you give us the funds. So companies, corporates, your state-owned agencies, those were very good at providing bursaries and assistance to students not so long ago. So what has happened? What has changed? Because those are the very people who would come back. They need those students in the field. They need those qualified people to come and join them, to join their workforce. So this is a responsibility on everybody. Like I said, we can't just sit here and say, well, it's somebody else's problem. Companies need to come in and say, what are the skills shortage in our company, in our industry, and how can we contribute to that? I mean, there's bursaries, but I think there is room for more companies to get on and provide more bursaries. Financial banks, for example, they probably need to look at the way that they give loans or the criteria that they use to provide loans to students. Maybe they are too stringent, because if I don't have surety or somebody who can stand surety for me, I can't even get that loan. So everybody needs to come and say, well, look, how do we assist these students? Because people do want to study. But I think there's nothing, I can only imagine at least that burden of knowing that I don't even know if I'm going to be here tomorrow or next week because I haven't paid my fees. Yet we need the people to go through the system so that we can get them into the economy. So everybody's going to need to play a role with this one.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Motshabi Nomvethe from the insurance firm PPS. Thanks very much indeed for shedding some light on that survey.
Thank you.